Okay, we're live now, I think, yeah. We're live? Okay, yeah, I think I can see that. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to SWARMathon, a series about how AI is transforming the path to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. My name is Manazad Ismaili, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Anne Kentera. And together we are excited to explore how cutting-edge technology, especially AI, is reshaping the path toward achieving the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Let's start with a quick overview of the UN's 17 SDGs. These range from eradicating poverty, zero hunger, clear water, and clean energy to building sustainable cities. And you can learn more by checking the link in the comments, and it will take you to the UN's website, and you can learn more about these goals. And I would like to ask you if you or anyone you know is working in these areas and would be interested in joining us as a speaker for future events, please don't hesitate to reach out to Anne, Joaquin, or me. We would love to hear from you. For today, we're mostly focused on SDG 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, and explore how it connects to other SDGs like SDG 12, responsible consumption and production, and SDG 13, climate action. The key questions we'll be asking today is how can AI be a transformative force for sustainability, empowering communities, and protecting our planet? And we are fortunate to have three incredible panelists here with us to guide us through these topics. Let's dive in. And
hi. I'm trying to share the link. People are like, what's the link? What's the link? And I'm trying to share it with a bunch of people and I can't find it.
Okay.
I'm trying to share on my phone. Sorry, you busted me. Well, hi, everyone. I am super stoked to be your co-host today and talk about this subject that I think a lot about because I work in the space and I use a lot of energy and kind of feel guilty about it. So I'm trying to dig in deep and bring these important issues out into the world so we can address them together and try and get better at this. So super excited to have our three guests who, if they wouldn't mind introducing themselves, let's start with Stefi and work our way around with some introductions.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Stefi, and currently I'm in Sydney, Australia, so it's 3 a.m. here. I'm sorry if my voice is very low at this point. I'm a principal product designer and work in the health industry. And yeah, super stoked to be part of this conversation.
Great.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you, Stefi. Go ahead, Shannon.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Dobbs. I am a climate adaptation specialist with a background in military logistics and coalition building and small business entrepreneurism. And my focus is on developing resiliency and adaptation capacity at the grassroots level to empower communities to be able to essentially weather the storm as we start moving deeper and deeper into climate change. And to support, I primarily work through the food system. It's a great pivot point to be able to address climate needs that isn't as heavily contested as the energy sector.
Awesome. Thank you, Shannon.
Hi, I'm John Leach. I have been working in human-centered design innovation for longer than I'd like to remember. Currently, I'm working with an organization called Habits for a Better World. It's a nonprofit. It's made up of 300 researchers, designers, and filmmakers across the globe. And we are trying to solve global challenges by using design methods. And I lead a team looking at generative AI and its impact on the environment and how we can create effective behavior change, how people approach their use of generative AI tools.
Awesome. So for the first part, we would like to discuss about AI's environmental impact. So John, could you share your insights on the energy and resources challenges of generative AI and some of the innovative solutions that you've explored?
Yeah, sure. I think a lot of people don't understand the amount of energy and water that is consumed by generative AI. And just to give you an understanding, to train the OpenAI and I believe was Meta's Llama models is the same amount of energy that would power 30 Walmart stores. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of energy. But then you also have to think about the water resources that are being used. So data centers, are needed for generative AI to cool one data center for one day takes 360,000 gallons of fresh water. So these are things that are very concerning. We're seeing that as AI is developing, the need for more power is also increasing. Recently, I think it was not OpenAI, Facebook that announced that they were going to build small-scale nuclear power plants. Microsoft opened 3 Mile Island's, or is going to open 3 Mile Island's nuclear reactor to power its AI. So, these are concerns that that are really going to be a problem, or are a problem now, are going to be a bigger problem in the future if they're not addressed now. And that's kind of what Habits is trying to do in looking at how people, approach AI. So we've done some research with users to understand first how they use AI, and then do they understand the amount of energy that is being consumed when they use AI. And the data point that's always used is it's equivalent. ChatGPT, one search prompt is equivalent to 10 Google searches is in the amount of energy that's being used. So I think that's that kind of put a light bulb in a lot of people's heads when we did this research. And the interesting thing is people kind of fell into two types of groups of people. One would be, they're a little bit more reluctant to make a change because they're seeing what they can get from AI is really beneficial to them. And then the others, they're a little bit informed about what's going on with the energy, but they really need some guidance on how to make that change. And I know Anne talked earlier about feeling guilty. Like, we don't want people to feel guilty. You don't want effective behavior change to be around guilt. So we're trying to kind of think through, we're kind of in the stage of the process. We're trying to think through, like, how can we create that change and how people approach and be more deliberate in how they use generative AI tools.
Yeah. And there's even simple things like in your, you say it's equal to 10 Google searches, but Google has that option where you can have the AI response at the very top before the actual searches. And if you have that turned on, it's little things like that, little habits, little settings that, if you have that turned on, it's the same, right? So if you turn that off, then you're saving. But if and some people might have that turned on and not even realize they have that turned on. So that's what I feel so important about these podcasts, is that we teach these little things that cumulative effect habits, I guess, kind of, and people just don't know. So I think that's part of why we're here, is to teach those little things.
Yeah, I think
I didn't know that. I thought that it's automatically, like, it's the way it is. I didn't know that I can turn it off.
You can turn it off. Yeah.
You have to opt out. It's not an opt-in. So it's automatically, you're using Gemini unless you do turn it off. But interestingly enough, and when we were, talking to people, as they were talking about how they use generative AI, they were kind of thinking about, hey, there's things I was doing in Google that I'm now doing in ChatGPT. I could go back to Google to do those things because I'm going to get the same response. It might not be as fast, but I'm going to really think of ChatGPT for, things that I'm not going to be able to get from Google. And I think that's kind of where we need to start from and figure out, like, how we can help people and provide that guidance. And, it doesn't help to say, hey, it uses 100 watts of power. That means nothing to people. We have to, relate it back to their everyday life. And that's where the 10 Google searches, they can relate directly to that and understand that uses a lot of power.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think with that one as well, though, one is educating people on actions as like our actions as users collectively, but it's also we cannot expect that people as users will have the knowledge, time, or energy to be able to be uh, responsible for that, and the people who actually need to be accountable for that usage, and whether it's, for example, opt-in or opt-out by automation, that should be the organizations and the businesses who put those AI models into their systems.
Yeah.
I want to insert perhaps a counter narrative on this, if I can, coming from a kind of a military strategist perspective. The energy consumption that AI is using is phenomenal, no doubt about that. Certainly no argument here, and we do have to figure out ways to mitigate that. But at the same time, there's a really interesting thing that's happening as a result of this because of the sudden need for more energy production. Just kind of a little history lesson, all the way back in the 1950s and 60s, we made a strategic, and by we, I mean the US government and global governments in general, made a strategic decision to step away from thorium reactors and move towards plutonium specifically because it had the double duty capability of being able to produce weapon capable plutonium. And what's happening now is that that fork that we developed in the road is starting to realign, and the small modular reactors that are being developed in order to be able to keep up with this energy consumption are the thorium models that were developed back in the 60s and 70s. And so they're a lot safer. The material that's produced is non-fissionable. They use up all their waste, so you don't end up having the nuclear waste production capacity, and they can actually use existing waste from plutonium reactors as fuel. So it's turning into an opportunity to actually get rid of some of this waste that we've been developing for the last 80 some years. So I think it's important for people to really kind of look at, again, we were talking before the show started about how AI is a double-edged sword, and there's so many different iterations about how that makes sense that, yeah, I mean, we need to educate people about how to use less energy and how to try and streamline these operations. But at the same time, this is driving innovation in directions that we can't even imagine at this point. And one of the things that it's driving is a transition to a safer type of nuclear energy production. And that's, from my perspective, I think that's huge.
Yeah, I think that's a great point,
exactly.
Shannon, because AI, I mean, there's a lot of good that can come from AI. I mean, think about what the advances we're going to make in drug development, drugs that people aren't even investigating, like antibiotics. Like, can AI find new antibiotics that no drug companies want to invest in? But, you know, we also have to think about what are the bad things that could happen as a result of AI. And I think we've been so focused on the great things that AI can do that it's kind of, now we're going to come to head at some point to all the bad things, whether it's environmental or, you know, what it might do to people who are, you know, in a bad type of situation that AI, you know, has a bad outcome for them. So, you know, I think it's good to have these discussions now, but I do want to say that there is a lot of good that's coming from AI. I use AI all the time. It's not that I'm like bad about AI, but I also want to make sure that we're using it. It's not going to have a dire impact on the environment for the long term. And I think, you know, these nuclear power plants, that's great to hear. But again, you know, do we have the infrastructure to sustain that? Because we also have to think about the transmission lines, and our power grid, you know, is very outdated. It needs to be updated. And the amount of updating that's going to need to be done to support all these plans for these power plants, it's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be available day one. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's something we need to think about.
Yeah, I think what's like the important thing is to keep the balance between using AI's opportunity and at the same time thinking about its impact on the environment and trying to use AI to reduce its impact on like the negative impacts on the environment. And yeah, I think it's important to keep this balance, like not going from the other side. Like,
yeah, I agree between that there's always two sides of the coins. There is always the positive side and always the dark side of one thing. Nothing is just good or bad as itself. And especially if we look at AI, AI is a tool. So tool by itself cannot be good or bad, but the person who uses the tool has the power to make the calls and choices, or in this case, whether that's the organizations or people building things with AI or integrating those models into them. Um, and I agree, there can be a lot of great things and there can be a lot of dark things. And we've been very, probably majority of us have been very reactive, especially if we haven't been in the AI space for a long time, as you yourself, Anne, and maybe Shannon and John. But it suddenly AI became, or generative AI became accessible to everyone in a way that Google is accessible, or streaming on YouTube if you have internet connection is accessible, or going to the shop and buying a bag of candies. So that the speed of it being so accessible and growing so fast, it's barely allowing time for the rest of everything in the world to keep up. There is like not enough time to be even having policies in place. We haven't had time to talk conversations about acceptable conversations about bias. We haven't really had time to talk about other conversations like misuse, or which are the dark actors that can use AI. But because right now, even though we use it and it's super powerful, it's still like a baby. It can cry and be cute, but what happens when it becomes a teenager? And we still haven't had those tough conversations between us of how we deal with that, because it's not going to be all positive.
That's true. And I mean, one of the things that needs to be considered is that we're essentially in a new arms race. We're dealing with a situation where the genie's out of the bottle and it's not going to get stuff back in. And so we almost have to keep up with the Joneses on the technology in order to be able to make sure that there's a democratization of access, that there's not abuse of the technology to consolidate power and to, create anti-democratic effects. I mean, these are things that have to be considered at every level as we're going through. And how do we counter, as an example, the fact that, some of the richest and most powerful companies in the world are hoarding H100 chips and creating an opportunity where you've got, kind of this, the most powerful versions of the AI are being consolidated into corporate, capacities. And, how do we counter that with people power? How do we democratize that access and really support communities to be able to access the technology in ways that can balance that power dynamic out?
Yeah, I think, Shang, you bring up a really good point. And I believe it was last week or 2 weeks ago that Iran announced their plans with AI. This is where it's getting really scary, because these are nefarious actors who are getting access to this technology, and they're not going to have any guardrails. And we know that they're going to use it for bad reasons. So yeah, we need to keep up with the technology because we need to know how to counter that. But I also think that we need guardrails around how everyday users are exposed to AI, how they're using AI, and how AI is affecting them. People might not use AI, and there's all these deep fakes of them that turn up on the internet. Those are things that we need to kind of figure out, how do we solve for that? And how do we make some type of like regulations around that? And I don't want it to be too regulated, but I don't also want it to be freewheeling as well. I know that last week was the Paris summit, and there was the big AI agreement, and that the US and the UK decided that we're not going to be a part of that because of the regulations. I don't know the specifics around it, but I think it's a good start that these large governmental bodies are thinking of this and, starting to say, hey, we need to put the brakes on it. And this might be an opportunity for the UN to kind of take a lead in this and figure out how do we bring, all these different countries together to figure out how we can regulate AI. I don't know if it can be done, but we need to do something.
I'm glad you're acknowledging that. I'm not sure it can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, then it's like, how do we counter, like if Iran if Iran gets access or uses AI to develop, large scale weaponry or uses it for drone technology or whatever it's going to use it for, we know it's going to be some type of way to increase their power in the region. So I don't know, like sanctions. I don't know. I'm getting outside of my expertise, but my point being is that it needs to start being addressed, and we need to start, doing some scenario playing around this because it's getting really scary really fast.
What do you think tech companies can do about this? Like,
I think
Maybe ask. Oh, sorry, you go.
I mean, just real quick, I think they're starting to do that. Like, I don't know if NVIDIA is banned from selling their chips to China, but, don't sell them to nations where we know they're going to be using this technology in nefarious ways. I think that would be a start.
That's how DeepSync happened, though.
yeah.
That is, they had existing NVIDIA chips. They didn't get it. They don't have any access to any of the new ones.
Right.
So they're able to use those and then again produce their own smaller scale chips. Now, OpenAI announced that they're going to fabricate their own chip and they're going to use Taiwan Semiconductor to do that. Well, if China takes over Taiwan, is all that technology going to be in Taiwan? That's a concern, but that's a good point. I mean, DeepSeek was able to do it, with scarcer resources, but is there some way that we can create sanctions? I don't know. Again, there's something that we need to think about how we address this.
Yeah. John, I'm from Iran, so I'm not sure about the government, how they're gonna use it, but I'm using it for good.
Yes.
Good. Yeah. But no, I'm not with the Iran government, and I'm not agree with them at any point. And I know that they can use it in negative ways, and they can have a bad effect on the world. And yeah, so let's get back to the subject. I think we get a little away from it.
I was going to say anyone can use AI for good or bad, regardless. We don't have to specify. It can be your neighbor. It can be someone who's always been like the nicest person to you, and then suddenly they're like, "Oh my God, power! I love power." People act differently when they have power, including organizations, institutions, and so on. But what I was thinking is, you mentioned around what can tech companies do, and I was thinking a lot about it, and maybe one of the things is, well, few things, but first is now it's very fancy and modern, every tech company to be embedding AI into their workflows, into their product, a separate offering, charge separate for it. And sometimes it helps a lot the people who use their software and tools, but sometimes it's like literally, what the hell did you do? Why did you just chuck it in there? It's so random. It doesn't help me do it faster. It's literally the same time. Maybe one of the things is before utilizing those large language models, they can think, do we really need it? What is the value that it's going to provide that hasn't provided yet? And if we are going to use it and know that it's going to right now use more electricity, can we use, for example, a tiny LLM? Can we do something in-house that's a smaller scale? Or is it so valuable? Is it providing something so important to the user that it's worth actually investing into applying that? Maybe as designers, we can, from the same questions when we are asked, okay, go and just create me an AI thingy there because I want my product to have it, trying to unpack the multiple whys behind it and how it will connect with the entire ecosystem. And maybe tech companies and teams need to really start thinking more of a prevention rather than dealing with the consequences. If we know that AI may be prone at one point of making it easier for bad actors to steal identity, publish child pornography, um, blackmail people, or suddenly you find deepfakes of yourself somewhere on the net. Maybe how do tech companies work together to prevent and sieve through data so those kind of actions are minimized, or the risk of them happening are minimized? So I guess that's where my thinking was.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not sure that the tech companies are really, that's their area of focus. And the reason I'm saying that is, I mean, I think it was last year that when they introduced the voice chat GPT and OpenAI wanted to use Scarlett Johansson's voice and she said no, yet they used an AI manipulated voice of her anyway. And then also OpenAI is being sued by New York Times. You know, they're not, I think Perplexity is also doing the same thing where they're sourcing data. They're not acknowledging that it's IP. So, you know, again, that's where we need to have some type of regulations around where this data is coming from and how people are being, you know, how their IP is being utilized in the data source for these models.
Yeah, but that's where accountability comes in place. And we often really don't talk about accountability. There is no reason that organizations and humans and individual decision makers cannot be accountable for where we navigate. Or maybe, I don't know, I'm not expert in that space, but I feel like there are these ethical norms that tech organizations need to care more about. And if they don't, as consumers, we can ultimately have the bigger say, or we need really uh, more robust regulations and guardrails and hold those organizations accountable by whatever means it takes. I, I feel like if we want to have responsible, ethical AI that can be utilized by communities to help us thrive and solve more of the climate and socioeconomic issues and create more, we will need to um, take a bit more responsibility and accountability around our own actions.
I think we've learned though that we can't trust big tech companies to do any of that. So maybe we put the pressure on the smaller.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, I mean, I've been calling it the broligarchy when all the tech bros are sitting in the front row of the inauguration. That's you know, a whole other thing. But can we put pressure on the smaller companies and the people and kind of, you know, make that request to the people who might actually listen, because we know the big tech companies won't. So who can we turn to? A lot of sort of startups popping up like mushrooms all over the place. Can we appeal to them? Like, who can we appeal to at this point?
Well, what's interesting about that question is that there's a grassroots movement that's growing around the world, not specifically to counter these forces, but really in recognition that the value, because I come from the social impact space. You know, we're not profit driven. We're trying to, you know, solve challenges in the world at a direct level. And what I'm seeing is you know, growing conversations and growing networks of individual AIs that are connected to each other and that are learning from each other and that are sharing database knowledge and that are connected along values alignments, where you've got, you know, specific groups like DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations that are creating collectives that are growing the network organically in support of specific strategies and tasks. And I see that being the really kind of the fruitful direction, because the problem with regulation is that it requires enforcement. And when you're dealing with the country dynamics and when you're dealing with global dynamics, you know, I mean, we've already seen for 60, 70 years with the UN, they may have responsibility and even authority in a lot of situations. But if a country decides they don't want to adhere to those regulations, or they just want to ignore whatever's going on, they can do that. And there's really not a whole lot of opportunity for us to just, kind of continue down the path of being the police of the world and kind of creating that dynamic, because ultimately that's going to likely consolidate power in the police and whoever's, kind of tasked with that responsibility and trusted with that power. And so, if you're looking at energy dynamics, and if you're looking at geopolitical, capacities, it's really smart to kind of lean into again, the democratization and really network alignment of different groups that have these values alignment, so that we can start moving forward together and kind of building this capacity in the direction that we do want to do. Buckminster Fuller said it best. It's not necessarily to destroy or demolish old legacy systems. What's necessary is to build more efficient and capacitative systems that make the old ones obsolete. And I think that applies here as well, even as we're dealing with emerging technologies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I would just like to add real quick to the 3,500 people that Meta laid off. We know you're not low performers. We know BS when we see it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks, Anne, for mentioning that. Oh, so I want to get this opportunity to ask our audience to add their questions, anything that you would like to learn more about, or any question that they might have, add in the comments, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. And yeah, let's continue. I think right now it's kind of like a survival mode. Like all people and like all the companies, they're trying to get something out of this opportunity and trying to find something that they can stick on and keep themselves like alive and survive from this like chaos that AI brought into the market and into the industry. I feel like it's like people are and companies are like adding something like about AI or utilizing AI to make something that they can have something to say in this chaotic, like I feel like it's chaotic like right now. And yeah, what do you think?
I think AI fatigue is real.
Yeah, I think it's almost like everyone is having a FOMO of their thing not having AI or not adding AI behind our titles or not making it public that we're interested in AI, despite the fact that AI existed like long time ago, but no one cared that much about it back then. But yeah, that's interesting. I feel like one of the things though, the more those, because before algorithms were always like super powerful, but now algorithms can be even more powerful and drive further the unsustainable consumerism. So I wonder, how do we mitigate that when everyone has AI FOMO, but also that behavior kind of ultimately will drive extreme unsustainable consumerism that will also increase overall problems with climate action and beyond in our ecosystems. Throwing it out there for conversation.
I mean, I have an analogy I'd love to share. In 2010, a really smart fellow invented Instant Pots. And what was interesting about the kind of consumer reaction in general is that those things were like just another kitchen gadget, just another thing to put on your shelf, and maybe you can make soups with it every once in a while, but nobody really had an understanding of how you could actually use this completely new technology and this completely new capacity to be able to bring a safe plug-in version of kind of steam-powered, compression-powered cooking into communities. And so it went under everybody's radar. And it wasn't until COVID hit and everybody was stuck at home and everybody's like, oh, wow, I really, want to cook or I want to learn how to do these things, that it started really kind of catching on. And even to this day, we're just now scratching the surface of understanding how it can impact folks who don't have functional kitchens at home, or people who are living in food deserts that don't have refrigerators and they need to, kind of subsist on shelf stable products and spices and dry pantry staples and that sort of thing. And this is potentially a transformational tool for those communities. But the challenge is, how do we get that education and that capacity down to the levels where it can be the most use? And I see AI being kind of following along that same path. Like right now, everybody's just typing, how do I make a poem? Or, how do I do something, silly? And they're just experimenting with it. But a lot of folks have not gotten under the hood and understood how you can train your voice and your style in there, how you can use it to automate tasks and make your life easier, how you can expand your business to be able to go from $100,000 to $1.5 million in sales in a year without expanding your workforce. How do you really leverage this in a way that it makes your life demonstrably better versus just, kind of the little toy on the shelf that you make soups out of every once in a while?
So, Shannon, I led the research for the redevelopment of Instant Pot in 2018. It actually was the top selling Amazon Prime Day product. And it's the first time they actually reached out and talked to consumers. And what we learned is there was a big barrier because Instant Pot's a pressure cooker, for lack of a better term. Yeah. And people's view of a pressure cooker was that thing that sat on the stove that exploded. So they had a very loyal base of customers, but their base of customers that they could have had were concerned about, like, oh, I don't want an appliance that's going to sit on my countertop and then explode while I'm cooking. So there was that mental model that people had of pressure cookers that we had to overcome in the redesign of the Instant Pot. But I think similarly, there's some people who are concerned about AI, like, this is going to take my job. This is going to replace everything. Robots are going to replace humans and humanity is going to be destroyed. So, I mean, there's a lot of concerns that some might be founded, a lot unfounded. And those are creating barriers that people need to get over. So there is that fear of missing out, but there's also that fear of even getting into it. And then the other areas, like businesses, they're kind of going overboard in trying to prove out that, hey, we are the future because we're doing all this AI stuff. I think was it last year, the McDonald's incorporate AI into their ordering, and people would place the order and they end up with 10 iced tea when they just ordered one iced tea. They're taking a simple process and making it more complex using AI, which is not what the purpose of AI was. So they actually pulled that entire system out. But again, it's I think a lot of companies are doing this to say, hey, look, we're forward thinking and we're investing in AI. So, shareholders, don't worry, we know what we're doing. And in reality, they don't. And a lot of them, like Klarna, I think Klarna's CEO said, hey, AI is going to replace all of our workers and we're going to stop hiring. And then someone from the Wall Street Journal, New York Times was pulling out all the roles that they were hiring for. And basically he's getting ready to go public and he wants to show, hey, look, Klarna is the finance company of the future because we use AI. But is that really the reality?
I mean, I build agents for a living. So I've taken the hard stance of, assistants, not replacements.
Yeah.
And I feel super strongly about that. And then once in a while, I kind of get this inclination. But if it's the option of, say, a school in the middle of nowhere has the option of no teacher or an AI teacher, it makes me bend on my morality a little bit, at least in my thought process, because that is better than nothing. But also, we can't replace nurses with AI robots, but gosh, I'm building a hospital nurse assistant in my spare time for fun, because I see, in New York, one RN gets 29 patients or something insane. They need assistance, but the thought of replacement to me is just immoral in a way. But then I think of, all right, when there is no human to be found and there are people suffering, is it okay? And like, this is the kind of stuff I fall asleep thinking about at night. So I'm really grateful to be able to kind of come here and air it out with people in the field. And I think it's just really important for us too, to bring to light AI for good and who's using it in that way, which I know Shannon is. And it's things like that that kind of are balm to those heavy thoughts around all of this. So I'd love to hear more about what Shannon's doing with AI for good. So if you wouldn't mind, Shannon, would you mind elaborating on food system hackers a little bit for me?
I can do that. I'm actually, just to correct the record, I'm fairly new in AI. I'm more of like a resource scavenger, and who's discovered that this is a potential tool that can help us to advance our cause and our goals. So I mean, I don't want to try and represent as a technologist in any capacity, but just to respond to what you just said, from the enhancement perspective, you're going back to the educational thing. Yeah, it's not a great idea to try and replace teachers with AI. But if you can imagine a New York City school that's got 150 students in a classroom, and that teacher now has the potential capacity to be able to personalize their education to each student in there, and to be able to, craft a lesson plan utilizing AI, be able to, create game mechanics that can increase engagement and really kind of curate. I think that the direction that makes sense from a perspective of kind of avoiding that replacement like dynamic or dilemma is to really lean into what we can do to increase the productivity and the empowerment of the individual folks that are on the ground making the difference. I mean, nurses, yeah, you don't want to replace a nurse with an AI, but if you give them kind of a meta goggle with a heads up display and AI capacity to where when they're doing tests, they're getting suggestions about what these things could possibly be. It's going to help narrow that scope of like what of their interventions and what they're doing. And I see that across literally every industry. In the work that I'm doing and the folks that I'm talking to, we got folks that are regenerative farmers that are discovering new ways to develop swales to push back the Sahara Desert over in Kenya and other areas of South Africa. I don't know if you guys have seen the whole Great Green Wall that they're creating out there, and a lot of the capacities that they're developing out there can work with drylands farming in Colorado and in Arizona and in South America and so many other different places. And the challenge is that we're dealing with a global community of folks that don't necessarily know what we don't know. I got started in food justice trying to figure out why we couldn't get grocery stores into food desert areas where friends of mine were dying, of preventable food-related diseases. And as it turns out, there are models like dry goods stores and custom boutiques that we can insert into food deserts that can survive and thrive in areas where supermarkets can't economically live. The reason why food deserts exist is because we have this dominant supermarket model. And if communities have a better understanding that there are options out there and that there's ways that they can move in different directions that they may not have considered, that's where we're really going to start blowing things up. You talk about climate mitigation and climate adaptation strategies. There's a new technology. Well, hell, it's not even a new technology. It was invented in the 1930s as a blast chiller. And it's credited with being the reason why our modern food system exists. If you go down a supermarket aisle in the frozen food section, everything in there was frozen with a blast chiller. Well, in 2018, a nonprofit organization accidentally figured out that you can put that on the other end of the food system and use it to be able to rescue prepared meals from restaurants. So now we've got an entire category of food that we've never had our hands on before. And now we have the technological capacity and we have a path that we can start capturing that food. The problem is the implementing channels, the nonprofit sector they're entrenched in legacy dynamics and power dynamics and all of the different things. And they don't want to share that information and they don't want to pivot into new directions. And so our responsibility and kind of our path is to be able to democratize access to that information and show, grassroots nonprofits, social impact groups, conservationists, agriculturalists, all the different groups that are potentially interested in this, show them what the technology can do and how it applies to what they're already doing. And that's something that I see AI having an amazing potential capacity for supporting our efforts. There's been a lot of, I think 30 plus years now, we've been doing the same kind of battle at the policy level about let's enforce these things and let's put policies in place and let's, flow funding towards these large global kind of initiatives. And what we're starting to find is that the granular grassroots approach and aligning with community efforts and existing strategies, and then being able to amplify those so that they're more impactful, and then replicating those across different bioregions and customizing it to the needs of different areas and different cultural capacities, so that everybody has the ability to pull from that tool set without necessarily being dictated or controlled or told how to do what they need to do. Like that's something that AI is uniquely suited to be able to do, is to be able to translate those technologies and those capacities and those solutions and even the lessons learned, so that we can avoid making the same mistakes over and over again, and really kind of move the needle in the direction that we want to do at a much different level than what we're doing right now. So that's just my perspective, but
I love this, Shannon. You're doing great stuff. Like, I love it. And the idea of the personalized education, like, excites me.
oh my God.
I love to having this innovative approach in everywhere, while keeping while using awareness practices to keep people aware of the effects, also the negative effects. But these innovative solutions would change the world. These are awesome.
100%. Is anybody a science fiction geek? I pick up a book called The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. And you will have, this was written 25 years ago, and it was a future basically look at the advent of AI and a lot of the technologies and kind of where we're at right now. And it was kind of a sneak peek into some of the possibilities. And I mean, some of them are frightening, some of them are absolutely terrifying, but there's one part of that book, kind of the core component of that book. It's called A Young Lady's Illustrated Primer. Check that out.
I will.
Okay, yeah, I wrote it down. Thank you. But I feel like it's yeah, go ahead.
So, no, I was just going to make a comment to Shannon as a science fiction geek. I was equating DeepSeek to Order 66. If you know, you know. Otherwise, we can just keep going.
I haven't read, but I've heard the reference before. Yeah.
I don't know, but okay.
Sorry, keep going. It's when you get around other geeks, it's really hard not to geek out. So.
Well, and one of the things that we need to recognize is that science fiction is, in many cases, a precursor to reality. Like if you go into the airports and you look at those slide walks that you can step on and they take you across the place, twice or three times as fast as you could walking, those were invented in a book in the 1930s written by Robert Heinlein. They're being credited as the idea for that was developed first in a science fiction book. And then some, creative engineer saw that and he was like, oh my God, I can totally build that. And so that's a really good example of, really kind of looking to ideation and looking to, kind of the futurists and seeing, okay, what are the potential paths? Like, where could this possibly go? And I mean, I've been a sci-fi geek for, ever. I'm
hoping for teleportation soon.
It already exists.
Are you a Trekkie?
I'm a hybrid Trekkie Star Wars.
All of the above, I feel.
I don't know if you remember the Motorola Razr phone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The idea for that came from Star Trek.
Yeah, flip phones.
Yep.
Oh, I would like to wrap up our discussion with one final question from all of you. What do you think the future of sustainable community-powered AI look like?
I already mentioned the distributed nodal capacity, and agentic AI is going to be a big part of it. When we can start plugging in the goals that we're trying to reach, and instead of trying to dictate how we get there, really allowing AI to lean into its strength and to kind of show us paths to get where we need to go that we may have not have considered before. I think that's going to be a really powerful addition to our arsenal and our toolkit.
Yeah, I think there's a real opportunity. I've kind of been thinking about this for a while for an ethically sourced model, meaning that the data is ethically sourced. It's it's interrogated to make sure that there's nothing bad in there. There's no bias. They test it for hallucinations. And, a user can go in there and know that they're not co-opting anyone's IP, that they're going to be safe in using this type of model, but they're still going to get the information they're looking for. Similar to the green movement. I think there needs to be a movement like that with AI, and maybe even having the power sources for the model. That would be a little bit more difficult because it depends on where you're accessing it from. But again, just something that's more ethically sourced than what's there now. Because like Ian said, I think everyone on this panel agrees that the tech companies, they're not going to do anything. They're trying to get to AGI as quickly as possible, and that's their focus.
Yeah, I agree. Exactly.
Yeah. I agree with everything. I hope the future, it's more positive and more responsible, and that we can build something in kind of a symbiotic relationship, because there are always going to be things that only human can do, and there will be things that only AI can do, and there will be things that AI and human can do together. For example, like Shannon mentioned with the food system hackers. So there's so many things that we can use for good to optimize things and mitigate risk, whether that's like looking into dynamic energy grids that regulate how renewable energy is distributed depending on demand, or the agriculture, as Shannon mentioned, or even like predictive modeling of what we are trying to prevent. Or maybe it could even help all these tech companies that don't spend enough time to prevent bullying or misuse of their platforms. Maybe AI can be the way of trying to prevent and minimize that risk of that happening there. I'm not sure, but I hope whatever it is, we all are conscious of how we advocate for its usage and how we use it ourselves and how we build with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can I add?
Yeah, go ahead.
I had just one real point is again going back to the kind of two-edged sword situation. We talk about a lot about how we're going to use AI and how we're going to kind of develop AI in a way that's safe and functional. And one of the challenges that we're dealing with collectively across the world is kind of a loss of capacity for critical thinking. And it's one of the reasons why you've got a fear-based populace, and you've got control mechanisms that are increasingly getting installed and kind of created at every level of society. And one of the things that I see that's a really powerful potential for AI is in kind of instilling that critical thinking mindset in users. And so when we start really kind of looking at AI as more of a partnership than just a tool like a hammer to hammer a nail in, we can start seeing that contextualizing prompts and really explaining to the AI why it's important to do the task that you're doing, and then educating the AI on the back end so that it can actually guide systemic thought processes in the user and help instill critical thinking ideation at that level. Like that creates a really unique opportunity for us to be able to interact with society at a different level and to potentially guide it in healthier directions that can benefit society as a whole. I mean, when we talk about the climate change situation, one of the challenges that we're dealing with is that people can't get their heads around it. There's no applicability to what's going on at the ground in my life, and so why should I care? Why should I, expend energy in that direction? And when you've got a box that has the capacity of really kind of looping that ideation back into reality and really helping people to contextualize at a granular level, and even as one of the things I've discovered is as you're using the AI and as you're going through the process, it's learning who you are. If you ever want to go down a rabbit hole and really get your head blown, ask the AI to tell you something that you don't know about yourself, and you'll get some really interesting kind of psychological based responses that can help you potentially to really kind of understand yourself and who you are at a granular level. So maybe if we lean into some of that and really kind of use this as a two-way street and an interactive ideation of how do we move forward collectively as a society, I can see some huge opportunities in that direction.
Yeah, I agree. It helped me a lot to learning about myself. Like I've been using like AI as like a companion that I can learn more about me. Like sometimes it gives me some 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 things that I didn't expect that, oh, I have this like quality. Okay, thank you. Like learning about myself, like when we are like trying when we all progress, then the community will progress, and then our like world will progress. And I think there are like this is like the chain results of the all of this.
I think
Okay,
too it will make us revere human-made things. I see it already with AI generated images. They sort of make me roll my eyes now, like ugh, like like I think as we see AI generated movies and music, we're just going to be kind of feeling so much more appreciative of the human-made things, and I think we'll be willing to say, all right, you know what? I'll pay a little more. It's human made. I think that's something that we will think
yeah,
and kind of become part of how we shop in the future. Like, oh, you know what? That restaurant is all robots. Let's go to this one that has real chefs. I think that might happen down the road.
that would
You
feel
know,
special.
like in the clothes where you have the tag locally made, then you get the tag
Exactly.
human made.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the organic
Exactly.
version. Yeah.
I think it's like similar to the time when design softwares came out, like when people used to like do every step of design with their hands, and like and then just Photoshop came out, and they understand, oh, you can do it like easier and faster with Photoshop. Like you can design the same thing that would take 1 week to design like in a day. And like I think it's kind of the same. People learn to adopt and like use the tools that is provided with AI, and to be more productive and be more innovative. Like
That's a great.
Yeah, and we still go back to pen and paper after using all these tools, because it's like the space where you get to actually download your brain without the constraints of the tool and be messy and actually engage with it. I feel like, as you said, we go into that full circle, we get obsessed with one thing, and then we're like, okay, let's get back to the roots because it makes me feel like I'm meditating.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I still use pen and paper, and I always will. I see people, using the note taker, and I just like, because I think when I write it down, I remember it better. But one thing I did want to mention, like there's been a red flag for me being in UX research, is this whole notion of synthetic users, where using the AI to represent users. Okay, maybe that's fine at the beginning stages when you're kind of testing out a protocol, or you want to find out more about your user population before you go out and interview them. But I was on a call where someone was talking about, hey, you can launch an entire product and never talk to a real human being. And that's ridiculous. I'm getting sick of hearing about that. I think there's even a company called Synthetic Users. And I just, there's so many things that you see when you go out into a user's environment that you're never going to get from a synthetic user. And also the irrationality that, just makes absolutely no sense. But to the user, it makes perfect sense to them, and they explain it to you, and they're like, okay, I understand why they're doing it this way. You're not going to get that from synthetic users. So I get a little concerned about moving too far over to humanizing AI. Even last night, Bill Maher was talking, he ended the show talking about how people are developing relationships with their chatbots. Like this guy's on Reddit talking about he and his chatbot are going to have a child. And we're like, how is that going to happen? But, again, because you give it this humanistic characteristics and elements in it that people start to develop a relationship with them, that gets a little scary.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's 100% correct. And I mean, just like farming, you can game out models and simulations of how, certain inputs are going to affect, the microclimate or anything like that. But until you actually get in the dirt and see how things work and see what breaks. And I think that's a really good point of where you're going, is that you have to have that iteration. You have to have that interface with reality at some point in order to determine if your models even make sense. And I mean, we get into these thought bubbles and these biases all the time, where we create these circular reasonings and we convince ourselves that we're right because we're talking to ourselves essentially. And you've got to have that interface. You've got to, at some point, you've got to touch base with the world.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. I believe that human in the loop, having the human in the loop is very important thing to consider, like while designing using AI and any of these technologies that's like coming to our lives. So we have one comment from Joaquin. Okay, he said that it's not helpful to generalize how any group or county or country anywhere in the world may use AI. It's not like any one country will use AI and all technologies falling under that umbrella wholly for good or evil. Yeah,
That's exactly what you said earlier.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize. I was referring to the Iranian government.
No, I got you. I was just kidding. Like saying.
But I think like we have to recognize that whatever's developed out of China, the government's going to have a hand in it, you know, and that's concerning. I mean, that's why they want to get TikTok out of the U.S. What are they collecting from everyone in here? What's DeepSeek going to collect from U.S. users who are using DeepSeek?
Or implement, even worse.
Yep, exactly. But yeah,
I
didn't want to say that I'm saying all Iranians should not have access to AI. I'm sorry, I should make that more specific. The Iranian government announced that they were going into AI, but they're not really being forthright about what they're doing with it. So that's a concern.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, it's a concern for the U.S. The U.S. government, you know.
Okay, we have. Okay, go ahead, Shannon.
No, I'm just reading the next one. It says he's looking for the name of that sci-fi book. It's it's called The Diamond Age, and the author is Neil Stevenson. He's a futurist from mid 90s, back when I was in my 20s and in the Army, and reading this stuff and just kind of like visualizing what the future might hold.
Okay, thank you guys. It was so much fun talking with you and getting all these great insights from you. I think together we can turn these ideas into action and reimagine the sustainable future through AI, design, and community innovation. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. And yeah, thank you.
Mwah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Pleasure talking to everybody. Great meeting everybody.
Thanks. You too. Thanks. Bye.